Hello friends! This video will be all about masking fluid, its application and usefulness in a watercolor painting. I will introduce this interesting art material to you and give you 10 tips and tricks on how to handle it with ease. If you are not yet subscribed to my channel, consider doing so because in the following video I will review and compare a few selected brands of masking fluid and will do a small giveaway because I have no way of using all the bottles that I bought for these two videos, so let's get to it. Masking fluid, or a drawing gum as it's sometimes referred to, is a material that's specifically used with watercolor or inks to help you protect your highlights and essentially all the areas of your painting that you want to stay untouched by your next wash. Applying masking fluid creates a film on the paper surface that resists water and can be removed later on after all your paint has dried. It comes in very handy in a wide variety of watercolor techniques. You can use it to mask in realistic highlights but also create beautiful textures and decorations that take advantage of the negative painting effect. Before you get started on using masking fluid, however, you really need to be aware of some aspects that I'd like to discuss in this video. Jumping into it without knowing how the material works exactly can not only ruin your painting but also your painting tools. In general, you need to be aware that using masking fluid will slow down your process a little because you need extra time to apply the fluid, drying time and then removing time. For this reason, I do not always use masking fluid and simply use negative painting techniques sometimes, which is quicker and can create the same or very similar effect. I'll do a separate video on negative painting too, because even though it is a little more advanced in my opinion and relies on some more experience with watercolor, it can really enrich your paintings. That being said, I always make a decision whether to use masking fluid or not based on the size of the areas that I need to preserve. If it's lines or very small elements, then I go for masking. If they are larger, then I'm confident that I can simply paint around them, and that's basically the definition of the negative painting. So you don't have to mask a larger area just because you need to keep it white. You can paint around it, but in my experience, beginners often feel more safe using masking fluid and tend to mask more areas and more often, which is completely fine. You'll probably limit the use of masking fluid in your paintings as you progress and feel a little more confident in your watercolor painting skill. So here's a few tips that I would like to share in order to help you minimize the risk of damaging anything and help you create the result that you will be proud of. My first tip is to apply the masking fluid to 100% dry surface. This is important because you can mask already painted areas too, not just white paper before the first layer of paint. And here it's especially risky because if there is even a little bit of wetness in your paper, your masking fluid might rip while removing, or it will be very hard to remove from the paper. I always use a hairdryer if I'm applying masking fluid on top of my already painted layers, and just make sure that paper is 100% flat because that's a good indicator that there is no wetness inside the paper fibers. Second tip is to let the masking fluid dry properly. Do not try to even speed up the drying process with the hairdryer this time. It really needs to be solid dry and it might take from 10 up until 20 minutes depending on how thickly you painted the masking fluid on top of your paper. But how you can tell when it's dry, this might look a little different with each masking fluid, but overall the fluid appears milky when it's wet and then more transparent when it's dry. Some fluids will darken upon drying, some will become completely transparent. I will show you some differences in the second part of this video, in which I test out a couple of different types and brands. Third tip is to not try to remove the masking fluid before everything is dry. Again, the drying is important and I wouldn't emphasize this so much because when you pay attention to your painting and to your process, it is really clear when it's safe to remove, but I've just seen impatient people ruin their paintings way too often and so I'm stressing this. For the third time, make sure everything is dry. Tip number 4, buy masking fluid in a bottle and use old thin brush to apply it. I've tried so many types of masking fluid and companies that make them, they know that it is a tricky material and so they try to make it easier for you. Masking fluid is available in form of pen or thin squeeze bottles and I've tried it all. They definitely get points for effort. I even bought 10 of the squeeze bottles for the entire group of people during workshops to use, but we discovered very quickly that They work very well while they are new, and then they either clog or the fluid just runs out of them too quickly, resulting in very thick application that takes forever to dry. It looked like a very good idea, but in the end provides less control over the masking fluid application. The issue that I have with pens is that their tip is way too sharp and makes groove in the watercolor paper, and the clogging issue applies here as well. Also, pens won't let me vary the thickness of the line very much. So best control I can achieve when applying masking fluid is just to use a good old bottle and a very old synthetic brush that only serves this one purpose. Tip number 5 is to hide your good brushes until you are done working with masking fluid. It comes as no surprise that masking fluid is aggressive and sticky when it comes to brush bristles, and actually once your brush comes in contact with it, it is nearly impossible to get it in its original shape. I never had a brush that would survive even accidental touch of masking fluid. It's why I keep away all the good brushes until I'm done with masking. This applies to masking fluid diluted with water. If you accidentally dip your masking fluid brush in your water and then use the same water for your watercolor painting, so be careful about that because it happens. Tip number 6, another way to protect brush bristles while using masking fluid is the soap trick. You can dip your brush into liquid soap or can even use a soap bar and then get rid of excess soap. You can then dip your brush into masking fluid and keep on masking your painting. When you're done, make sure to wash your brush immediately with more soap. I still wouldn't use any expensive brushes for this, just a cheaper synthetic brush will do, and personally I just use old ruined brush with no bristles because I can apply the masking fluid the same, I just see no difference, and saves me some time since I don't have to look for soap. I just let the masking fluid dry on top of my brush and then remove it like this. Still, the soap trick is a useful one, and maybe for some of you this will be more suitable. Tip number 7, if your masking fluid is too thick to apply, which can happen over time as you use your bottle frequently, you can try to dilute it with a bit of water so that the application is easier. I wouldn't directly pour water into the entire bottle, rather set a bit of masking fluid aside and then dilute that amount to work with in your next painting. I would do a test before applying that to my painting though, since masking fluid is a liquid latex and is not quite meant to be used with water. I would just make sure that everything works as it should. Thinning definitely works with my Pebble drawing gum, but just make sure that the one that you are using doesn't misbehave. Tip number 8, remove masking fluid with a vinyl eraser rather than with your fingers. Our hands often contain natural oils and I just don't like to have fingerprints all over my paintings, and I find it easier to use erasers. Masking fluid even comes off easier this way. Sometimes when using thicker layers of masking fluid it rolls together nicely and you don't need an eraser, you can just peel it. Tip number 9, do not leave masking fluid on your watercolor paper for more than 2 days. This is a general recommendation and worries a little. I had masking fluid on for more than a week once and it all turned out fine. But just be aware that after the recommended time it may be harder to remove it and there is a higher risk of damaging the paper or the paint underneath. Lastly, tip number 10, store your masking fluid away from sunlight, ideally somewhere safe and dry at a room temperature, and shake before every use. I ran a test before use if the masking fluid isn't new to avoid unnecessary surprises that would potentially ruin the painting and cause frustration. It is also highly recommended to use up all the masking fluid within 1 year from when you open your bottle for the first time. This recommendation may vary depending on the brand, so just read the label carefully, but in my experience, after 1 year, masking fluid becomes unreliable and also unpredictable, and I rather dispose of it and get a new bottle. I hope my tips will help you have fun with masking fluid and experiment without frustration, and if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and the following video will be a comparison of a few selected brands and types of masking fluid. Looking forward to see you in just a few days.